Good day, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rudy Page, and I'm really pleased that I'm going to have a dialogue with my colleague, LIA GILARDI. LIA, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I'm delighted to be here, very happy to reconnect after so many years and reminisce and take a look back to what we shared in terms of research and observations as far as North London was involved, concerned, and as far as the creative industries today, and what is going on in terms of access, diversity, etc. So it's a long story, but we'll try to make it as short and as possible in a way that is in chunks, but hopefully conversation will flow anyway. If I can start, can I, Rudy?
Yes, please.
With myself. So there is a little story I want to tell you guys, which is really about my family. So I'm originally Italian from the north of Italy. I came to the UK in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, in 83, I think it was. But my family was a complex one. So my background is a complex one in that my father was an entrepreneur in the textile industry, and so it was a big family behind him of industrialists, etc. My mother was the daughter of a mechanic. So my father was perceived to have married beneath him. So my mother never was accepted by the family. So I grew up in this environment in which there was a mother who became a superwoman, a super mother. So she put all the kind of motherly instincts, all the kind of ideas, aspirations that she had and which she couldn't achieve because of this kind of family condition in which she was, never being accepted, onto the daughters. So we were like pushed and pushed and pushed constantly. And the words we heard all my life as a child was education, 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 aspirations. You can make what you want of yourself, but you got to put in hard work. So that was the message, and the message that I carried with me in my professional life when I started my also my degree in sociology in Italy, and later on when I came in to this country and learned cultural management and learned also urbanism. So I have a collection of skills in a way that I have amassed in various countries I lived. I also lived in Switzerland before coming here, and that's interesting and relevant to what we're going to discuss in a minute, because in Switzerland I was teaching basically literacy to immigrants, Italian immigrants, Turkish immigrants that were living in Basel, in the city of Basel at the time. So I was made director of this school, and I can tell you the experience of me being a young person there, teaching people for the first time to be recognized as individuals, for the first time to be able to pick up a newspaper, a book, and engage in culture, in a story, in literature, being emotionally touched by the stories they were reading for the first time. Because until then, their culture was an oral culture because they couldn't read or write. So that teaching of reading and writing, that learning, that kind of first access to what we call art and culture, which for us it might be going to the opera or something, for them it was like it was a real life-changing experience. And for me too, because from then on, what I learned is we have to, in every field we engage in, and in my case, the chosen field was cultural planning. It was like cultural strategy development. It was like helping cities to develop economies that were based also on industries related to culture. So from then on, I learned that it's not just a question of devising policies, It's a question of studying the communities at granular level in a neighborhood or in a city before you produce the policy, before you identify the measures necessary, really, for your city to become more economically viable, etc., or more interesting. Now we come to North London, which is where I met you, Rudy, and by then, and this is the 1998, 1999, by then I had started my own company, which was really based on this idea of cultural mapping. So the idea was, I know there is a place here and we need to focus on this particular part of London, in the case of North London that we were looking at. But we need to look at North London from two perspectives. One perspective is, who is working there, who is engaged in economic activity, etc. A quantitative analysis. And then there was a quantitative analysis of who is engaged in creative activity there, at ground level or at the top level in terms of industry, etc. And the third element, and the most fundamental one, was who within the community had the talent. Where was it? How was it clustered? How was that talent or kind of raw creativity being expressed at that point in time when we were looking at North London? And then from then on, we built our strategy for the North London creative industries. But Rudy, maybe I'm running too fast now. I don't know if you want to intervene at this stage or...
Thank you for that. That's a great introduction, because in a sense it brings us to how we then began to collaborate. And this was around the time I was leading the Synergy project. And so I'll just set out the case for the Synergy project, and then we'll go on to what that meant in as it related to the creative and cultural industries. So the Synergy project had its conceptual origins in the agency's acknowledgement, and the agency at the time was the North London Training and Enterprise Council and Business Link London North. So at the time, that was an integrated, what we would now call an anchor organization, bringing partners, communities together in the local economy, responsible for local skills, local people, local jobs, coordinating the institutions, the colleges, employers, and of course it was all underpinned by the local authorities. And at the time, that was Haringey, Barnet, and Enfield. And of course, they had relationships with the surrounding boroughs, of course. Waltham Forest in particular comes to mind. So the agency acknowledged that there were gaps in its services and activities. So as a local economic agency, with the result that not all communities were reached or sufficiently involved in its activities or services. The need was subsequently identified by the board for a new operational framework for the brokerage and delivery of economic development services across the sub-region. And as mentioned, the boroughs of Barnet, Enfield, and Haringey. Specifically, the board recognized the need for a delivery mechanism that was not only professionally appropriate, but would additionally be seen as representative of the communities that were the key beneficiaries of the program of services under consideration. In this case, the ethnic minority communities. So the Synergy project itself formally commenced in March 1999, when I was appointed as the project lead. So in fact, earlier on, the board had been instrumental in the establishment of a public-private and not-for-profit partnership organisation, which the Synergy Project would form a close working relationship. So that was known as the North London Cultural Diversity Forum.
Yeah.
And you will remember Dr. Edgar Neufeld was a chair, brilliant individual. I learned a lot from him, great mentor, and he was linked with Middlesex University as well at the time.
Yes, yes.
So what the forum did initially was set itself some outcomes, and they put together what was called the North London Regional Dynamism Conference. And in fact, that was held in June 1998.
Wow. Yes, yeah. Long before we delivered the report.
Long before.
The report was in 2000 or something.
Absolutely. So it shows the planning that had been undertaken at a senior level, institutional level within the region. And then, of course, the Synergy Project then went on to become one of its key implementation tools. Now, the important factor to this was that the aims of the North London Cultural Diversity Forum was for its membership to practice and promote equal opportunities in 3 functional areas: the recruitment and promotion of employees, the treatment of customers and clients, and the purchase and subcontracting of products and services. So the forum membership included some of the largest employers in North London, majority of which were public sector organisations, although its initial membership also included a number of organisations from the private, public and voluntary sectors. So it was a significant coordinating institution.
Yeah.
That was the point.
Yeah.
So going from there now, then, if we look at the creative industries report itself, you can take us through some of those steps.
Yes. If I can just go back at the time, what did we find? I just kind of looking here at what we were finding back then. Yeah. Back then, we were looking at the creative industries generating something like 20 billion in annual revenues. And we're talking 1998. In 1 year, they were talking about 1998, 1999, 20 billion in annual revenues, and employed about 400,000 people. So they were like, and now, if I look at it now, so bear in mind the 20 billion there, now it's around 47 billion generated for the London economy. And now these billions are generated also through measures which have been implemented recently, such as the creative enterprise zones. And Haringey is one of them. Again, North London, still now in 2023, 2022, when the creative enterprises, or earlier, maybe 2020, when the creative enterprises zone were created by the mayor. Now, so we're, there is a sort of a longitudinal study one could do in terms of saying, at that point, we were in London, in North London, we were discovering, we were looking at the industry, logistics was still there, but there were already elements of creative industries emerging in music, in artistic creation, in writing, in publishing, in editing, in translating, so in printing. So there was already almost like a cluster related to the printing, reading, literature, journalism, etc. that was emerging next to music and art. So there were already artists also located there. But what did we also find? We also found that there were immense barriers for the diverse communities present in North London, across North London, across the boroughs, etc., to access the opportunities that this industry was, the creative industries at that point were offering. So we made a series of recommendations in the report, which came out, as I said, in 2000. But you guys were already obviously picking up from the ground what the challenges were, because you were embedded in the sub-region at the time. So you knew the stakeholders, you knew the champions there, you knew what the real difficulties were. We were coming in as researchers with the advantage of being external, perhaps, to the situation and being able, perhaps, to look at it more objectively. On the other hand, with my method of qualitative assessment, it meant like we conducted, I don't know how many, probably 60 interviews across the board, across the boroughs, with a diverse group of people engaged in activities on the ground, micro businesses, micro enterprises, individual musicians, artists, etc. And all, on the whole, they were telling us, you know, the barriers are immense for us to access. Training costs too much, or so. But yeah.
Absolutely. And just to underpin what you're saying, because at the time I was facilitating workshops in the neighborhoods across the 3 boroughs, because the Tech Business Link wanted to find out what are the barriers as it related to the creative industries for that talent to stay in the area.
Yeah.
And also they wanted to find out, well, how many of the talented young people that actually left because they felt there weren't these opportunities. Yeah. And of course, even though there were sector clubs, there wasn't yet that development of a sector club that really understood about access to finance, access to, you know, all of the channels in order for these businesses to grow. Yes. Because there wasn't that clarity in terms of, well, what support is needed, how does the local institutions, or how do they actually adapt to supporting the creative industries? Because obviously institutionally it was still very new and not everybody really understood where the opportunity.
No, and also I think what we found is that there was no coordinating mechanism that could really set an action plan for the whole of the sub-region. But maybe we were wrong in thinking in terms of North London as a sub-region. Maybe we should have done it, maybe in the way you were doing it, going more at maybe at neighborhood.
At the neighborhood. And in fact, as you say that was one of the reasons why, from an implementation perspective now, because of course we used to think in terms of what's the policy, but you know, how is that policy from the reports and recommendations translated into action plans? So what we found the most effective way of working, which we use today, was the neighborhoods and local communities. And of course, the local communities also includes the institutions that support the neighborhood. You've got to get in there in the neighborhood first. And also, of course, there's a lot of cross-cultural collaboration that's not seen all the time. So yes, you have your various population groups, and that's why cultural understanding is as important as technical expertise, but also communication in terms of building trust with individuals. As you know, as a researcher, you know, if you really want to get the information that you require, then trust is essential. And that was a key thing in terms of what Dr. Akinfadahunzi really understood about that trust building of the researchers in the first place, to get the information that is required in order to make recommendations in their reports that everybody's agreed on are workable.
So you know, thinking today, if I were to go into the same situation today, I'm not sure I would get, in a way, the same positive response I got in doing my one-to-one interviews. because at the time, my English was very sketchy a little bit. And so the people I interviewed, they were like empathizing a little bit. So they were saying, well, here is a foreign girl or woman, I was young then. So yeah, okay. Today, I don't know if I would be allowed to go in there with my privilege, if you see what I mean.
Actually, you've made it such an important point, because if I take us into current practice in the health system, and particularly public health, and particularly around the mental health as well, given post-COVID. And you're right that there's suspicion, greater suspicion now, because many of the same questions have been asked and answered in the past, but there's little evidence of transformation or implementation, or ensuring that the public voice is an integral part of that local decision making
from the beginning. Yeah.
And so it's a big challenge at the moment, which we're having to think about and unravel again, and go back to where we started from, almost, in order to
I mean, I'm very tempted to, I don't know if we have time. Yes, we have time. I just wanted to read you a few things. And now we fast forward to today. We can go back whenever you feel like to North London. But at the moment, it's something staggering, which I've been reading from the Policy and Evidence Center, which is called PEC, from Newcastle University. So it's a bunch of researchers who are specifically working on the creative industries. And they say 72%, we are talking about 2019 now, so fast forward, 72% of the creative workforce in the creative industries are highly qualified. They hold a degree or higher level qualification or equivalent, compared to 45% for the whole economy. Okay, so creative industries these days, the workforce has to be, at least to be successful or something in your enterprise, etc., you have to have at least a degree, etc. Well, 52%, again in 2021, of the workforce were from high socioeconomic background, hence the degrees, etc. 52% were from high socioeconomic background, compared to 38% across all industries. This is 2020. So again, creative industries, good opportunities, fantastic way of expressing your talent, of digging into yourself and being able to be free and nurture what you have inside, etc., and be able to make money out of it and make a living out of it. Yes, but and if you are not from working class or something, then that's possible. Now, working class, they talk about we will need 263,000 additional working class. They say working class, but it's a blanket definition for diversity, etc. We will need 263,000 additional working class people to be employed in the creative industry sectors, to make it as socioeconomically diverse as the rest of the economy. So, 1 in 5 are successful if you are privileged, white, etc., in the creative industry. It would take 1 in 10 if you are from a minority.
Yeah.
So this is today.
Yeah, and that, again, that's the structural issues. And of course, in our local communities, we don't have that kind of institution anymore that can intervene, that kind of intervention, and so, direct resources, provide the business support, the creative support that's needed.
No, there is a plethora of business support. All universities are now crying out for getting people to have degrees. But then the question is, how do you overcome that barrier? How do you enter a
But back to the
university?
barriers of entry, because again, those those times there were low barriers
Yeah.
of entry into the sector.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah.
then again, in North London, what we found, even if you kind of knock down all the barriers, etc., networking wasn't there.
Yeah, and the networking and the cluster and the sector development is essential part. We did,
But the ability to be part of a network of influencers, of people who could provide you with opportunities. If you didn't know the producer who did something else or a video game the day before, if you didn't go to a pub or right out, had lunch with the ladies who worked in something else, in music or something, then even if all the barriers were broken down and you had access to a university place in creative industries, now they have many universities that offer such degrees. But if you don't have the networks that allow you to come out of your milieu, of your environment, then it's difficult once again.
so I guess, and touching on that then, so for the next few minutes of this first dialogue that we're having, let's look at some of the solutions then. Let's look at some of the good practice that you've seen of recent times.
Yes, there are good practices. I mean, Bristol, I love Bristol, but it's a city full of contradictions, as we all know, and
Every city.
well, like every city, really. But I've been working with Bristol for many years, since the 1993, with the starting of the cultural planning development partnership, and Andrew Kelly and all the people working with the mayor back then in 1993, 1996. So what they did there, they had an eye on what was happening in the technology and the creative industry. So they had one way of looking at places and spaces. First of all, at identifying places where they could incubate, where they could accelerate businesses, and where artists could be in residence, etc. So they used the old buildings they had, etc. The second thing that they were aware of the difficulties of people. Let's assume you get a space in one of these buildings, regenerated, etc. Who is going to pay rent for you? If your business, if you're a startup, or even if you are just a musician or an individual. So that was the second thing, was they established ways through which was subsidized, or they gave vouchers to people who wanted to be in those spaces, etc. They provided a whole system of dedicated per sector and subsector support from people from the industry. So if it is music, you have people from the industry volunteering, giving advice to people in those buildings or outside. And then they created spaces such as the Watershed Media Center. Within that, they also created and advertised it in a way that it was like, okay, come in. Do you want to play music? Have you got an idea? Come in and we will listen to you. So they had, and please come with your ideas. They had an open door almost for people to there. And then Andrew Kelly and his team, they were there to listen, and they were there to direct people to various opportunities that were there. Obviously, the university there also started doing.
So that sounds quite effective. So the institution that anchored this, and hosted this, how was that made up?
That was made of, it was a combination of the university, the city, who was paying for all these buildings, all these initiatives, etc. So it took a vision, a believing in the power of culture and the creative industries at the core. So the cultural development partnership was really the leading strategy place, where that developed until now. I think until last year, when it was disbanded, and then they are now carrying on in a different guise, and they call themselves Festival of Ideas. But it's a different thing. But the media shed and everything else, the watershed, the media center, and everything, they are still there, still working.
Right, so there's evidence of outcomes from that, and that's quite a generational amount.
Absolutely. You needed a visionary mayor, but you needed also people on the ground who were, culturally aware and beyond the Arts Council, because really the Arts Council there was a bit flagging in their interest, but the Chamber of Commerce, for example, was very interested, and they were partners in the Cultural Development Partnership.
Right, and I was going to come to that, and I'm glad you mentioned them in terms of the economy now, the local economic development, the events, the activities, again, the bringing in of people into the area, into the community.
Yes. It's very much also oriented to the students who are there, the night economy, the evening economy. But they try to measures now to implement measure. One of the night mayors and things like that also started there in order to cool down a little bit the scene, because in the 1990s it really exploded a lot. And what I have to say is that despite of all these initiatives, and Bristol, in my view, after 35 years of working in this field, is possibly one of the most interesting examples. We still have seen riots, we still see deprivation among the
inequalities.
Inequalities, let's put it this way. Inequalities.
Again, it's generational, because we know built in within these sort of activities that there are always barriers, of course.
Yes.
Protected, or carefully constructed and protected, as we say. But that's just part of the human condition, in terms of those barriers always have to be challenged. And
I remember my mother was telling us, okay, don't cry, what's this? What's the problem? Get on with it and go beyond.
And that gets back to your point about then when you go into neighborhoods and communities, that you find the people who are highly motivated, dedicated, they have the morale regardless of their situation, and they focus on vision and hope in order to get the transformation. And of course, it's how can we then use the levers of the various institutions to support them?
Yes, and they have the staying power, they have the energy also. These are our champions. I call them champions, but maybe it's a wrong way of putting it. But they are the people I start off with. So it's that, normally the traditional research, you'll have your stakeholders around the table, and there will be the boring ones. We know that, the usual stuff. And of course you need that. Of course you need that. But in parallel, you need to have your working kind of stakeholder.
And you're so right. And if you remember the conference I went to in Italy, in Turin.
Turin, yes.
I always remember the center piece of the conference. It was about the young protagonist.
Yes, it was. Yes.
That's what we think about in terms of neighborhood and community development. The young protagonist.
Yeah.
And then we kind of link that with what we call the servant leaders.
Yes.
And if you get that blend, you find that you can dismantle many barriers that are culturally internal barriers, because we can't move away from the fact that, in the sense that you began in the beginning, that within our cultures, there's inequalities and discrimination, and you've got to find a way to allow that talent to thrive. And then the wider world, the challenges of competition.
To be acknowledged, of course, we know, etc. But we can't stop there. That cannot be the end of the journey.
Exactly.
That has to be the beginning of the journey, as it was for me. And I don't know, maybe I'm projecting, my energy or something, but I'm still here today after so many years.
Yes, we are indeed. We are indeed. So on that great note, I look forward to our next dialogue as we kind of explore some of the other wider areas in terms of going forward now, because we, in a sense, what we've done, we've bridged from the 20th to the 21st century. And of course, as you know, when we talk about 21st century now, we talk about 21st century cultural learning and skills. So the pillars at the moment are around collaboration, creativity, communication, critical thinking. But we need some other pillars. So I'll be interested in your thoughts around that.
Empathy, I think, is another one.
That's a great pillar, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here. See you next time.